All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Chris Mindrink. I'm with DWD Technology Group, and today we're going to talk about American Cutting Edge and providing an extraordinary, can't say the word, customer experience to your customer by improving your business processes. And as we go through this presentation or through this conversation, it's meant to be open. So we ask that you enter questions in the chat window inside of the GoToMeeting chat window, and we'll take them as we can. And let's get started. So today, as I said, we're going to be talking to Gregory at American Cutting Edge. But first, we're going to talk about DWD a little bit, who we are. So we're an accounting firm with a technology arm, and we've been doing technology and Sage software since 1990. We've got 12 consultants in the group. We have a master developer also in the group that helps with our Sage 100 practice. Our biggest expertise tends to be in the manufacturing and distribution world. We also provide network services. So some of our clients will actually allow us to help them with getting their network set up and secure, along with implementing the ERP and providing software services. So like I mentioned today, Gregory Bilhart from American Cutting Edge is joining us. And so I'm going to let Gregory go ahead and introduce himself.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. As Chris said, I'm Gregory Bilhart. I'm president and COO of American Cutting Edge, and we are a manufacturer and distributor of machine knives and industrial razors. So it's really exciting stuff. You know, people wake up in the morning and they think, gosh, I can't wait to buy some more blades and knives, but that's what we do. And to give you context about the industries that we serve, if you look around the rooms that you're in, basically everything that is in that room, including the paint on the walls, gets cut at some point in the process. So we have a very diverse customer base, a very diverse product base, but it's all centered around cutting, razors from a couple millimeters on up to machine knives that you have to have a fork truck to pick them up. We have roughly 70 team members. Annual revenues are in the $30 million range, and we have an IT department of 2.5. We have our IT administrator, a business analyst, and I'm the half. And I probably caused more problems than I solved.
And Gregory, why don't you just talk a little bit about some of your background?
So my background career-wise, really I got started in marketing and then in sales management and then eventually executive management. I've worked for really only 2 companies in my career. 3, the first job out of college, which was distribution. And then I worked for a company that makes datacom products and was there for 18 years until we sold the company. And then I joined American Cutting Edge about 5 years ago. I am a jack of all trades, master of none. I've worked on probably 6 or 7 different ERP systems, from some home-built systems on Thoroughbred Basic up to SAP. I was part of the core team that implemented SAP at my former organization. And then most recently, over the past 5 years, working with Chris and the DWD team on Sage 100.
Okay. And so the first question that probably comes to mind for a lot of people is, why are we here today? And really, today we're here to share, right? We want to share things that American Cutting Edge has done, some of the ideas that come from Gregory and his team and the people that work there, and share that with our customers and our prospects, because really all of us are just trying to get better every day, right? Our organizations, and American Cutting Edge really understood that they understood that the customer experience is really a reflection of that company's internal processes, right? So as customers demand this, what we'd say an effortless experience from the products that they sell, they also expect that same in their business relationship with American Cutting Edge. So as the business continues to grow, or in today's environment, we all know we're all working through a pandemic, so growth is maybe not the right word at the time, but we're all trying to grow. What we're really trying to do is have a way to ensure profitability and future growth, and then foster this culture of continuous improvement. And so when I talked to Gregory about this, I said, I really would love to share the story and just, let him speak to what they have done. Yeah, we've helped them through this process, of course, but sometimes I always tell people I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm really the person who likes to listen and see how we can help. And so this is my way of getting it out to our clients for you guys to learn. And maybe you'll experience something or hear something that really makes you think about, hey, how can we improve our business? So with Gregory, first question I have for you is, what is the first step in identifying the changes that were needed to improve that experience with ACE?
For us, it really started with understanding pain points. Pain points of the salespeople, pain points of the warehouse team members, pain points in production. What was getting in our way? I think about it in terms of people, process, and systems. And so the systems part really supports the people and the process. So looking at what was frustrating for people. When I started as a consultant here in February of 2015, and then I became a full-time team member in August of that year. We had gone live with Sage and Sage CRM back in December of 2014, and I would say that we didn't do our homework at that time. We chose the right platform, but we didn't choose the right partner for implementation. So data wasn't clean. Some of the functionality that had been built over the years in ACT, which was our former CRM system, wasn't available in the new CRM system, and it caused a lot of frustration. Reporting was spotty at best, and it was all manual. And so we just kind of took a step back and looked at it and said, well, what are the priorities and how do we address it? And Chris used the term earlier, effortless experience. That's not something I've coined. I basically, something I subscribe to. Matthew Dixon is the author of a book called The Effortless Experience, and it's one of those books that really resonated with me. So that's really where we started.
Okay, and so usually when you're trying to identify these needs within your organization, and you can you talk about how you did that? Because yeah, we want to say that we just walk around and listen to everyone and we magically have this, but typically there's some sort of process that once we maybe have identified the different areas that we need to improve, right? How do we take that and prioritize that, or how do we sit down with our sales team members and make them part of the organization and make them own, the ideas and the things that we're doing going forward?
So the prioritization process was, we knew we needed to get some quick wins. And so we actually started with some CRM development because we had a function called prospecting groups, and basically we could put customers into various buckets and then we could market to them. Without those prospecting groups, it was very difficult to segment our customers. And so we were sending out these universal marketing messages that didn't mean anything to anyone. So really getting the key stakeholders involved, I'm sure the attendees, your team members have varying levels of interest, varying levels of understanding of technology. And so we pulled in the thought leaders and we said, okay, here are the pain points. How would you like to see it? What would work for you? What would make most sense? So we had to make some decisions as a management team about where we're going to prioritize, but initially it was showing we can improve, we can change, we are capable. And then building off of those wins and future initiatives. And then we ultimately migrated to a IT steering committee that meets quarterly. We report on what we've accomplished. We report on what we're working on. And then we talk about future priorities, and the IT steering committee, the IT part of it, we are not there to set priorities for the organization. We want the managers to meet with each other and talk about what should the priorities be and why. And we typically lean towards things that are customer facing going to the top of the list. Now, that's not always the case, but if it touches the customer even indirectly, that typically gets promoted higher than something that is internally only.
Right. Because a lot of, I mean, you really want to look at your organization from the outside in, right? How do people interact with us? Did you do anything to reach out to customers to get their experiences with the company?
We have. In my prior organization, we adopted Net Promoter Score, which is very common, simply because it's easy. You know, 2 questions on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this company to a friend or colleague? And question number 2 is why. Your 9s and 10s are promoters, your 7s and 8s are passives, and 6 and lower detractors. So it's your percentage of promoters minus your percentage of detractors. And so we went out to our customer base and tried to understand why they buy from us, what they don't like about us, what they do like about us. And we had a decent score. Our score was 60%. We got about 12% response rate, which is overall pretty good. But some of the areas that we found were lacking was automation. You know, I have to call to get a tracking number. You can't give me my freight cost up front. You know, you don't have a web portal that I can log into to see my invoices and things like that. So those were really important nuggets that we use to formulate our plan moving forward.
And would you say that some of that comes from how they interact with some of the bigger players, right? I mean, how we interact with Amazon nowadays and different companies like that, Costco, et cetera. Do you think that changes how the customer expects their experience to be with you, be it B2C in your case, but also in a B2B world? I think it's might be close to that same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, all of our customers are consumers at some level. And that Amazon experience, Costco experience, the digital experience, they're getting trained on what to expect. And that carries over into their work. Gosh, I can get these things, this information that I need from Amazon. Why can't I get it in my business? Why can't I get it from my suppliers? You know, and so trying to think about, well, what are the expectations and how is it changing? We also understand that the baby boomers are exiting the workforce, the millennials are taking a more prominent role in the workforce, and they grew up with the internet. And so, you know, do they want to have to go through a Rolodex or have to search for something? No, they want to be able to log in, find it, move on.
Right, right. So, I mean, as you go through all this, I mean, you're identifying and working with your team to identify changes, right? Pain points, as you say, right? Ugly moments, right? That happen, and then you have to prioritize them. So one of the things, and this is somewhat from experience between you and I, but is that if you can speak to that there was areas where there were multiple different processes that were happening that really could be combined into one, right? And I think that was kind of one of the things that you really did focus on to start with because of the significant impact on a customer relation that might have.
Yeah, so like many businesses, we got to where we're at through some acquisitions, divestitures, you know, new ideas, and our legal structure was very fragmented, and that was represented in our ERP.
Okay.
So in 2018, we worked to clean up our legal structure to have basically a single legal structure and then DBAs. But we were still hamstrung in Sage by having 4 different companies in Sage.
Okay.
And what that would require was, you think about month end, well, you have to do 4 closes. Well, it got to a point where the close process was so cumbersome, we weren't closing accounting periods. Reporting, you'd have to run a report in each company and then cobble it together. You know, and so there's a lot of redundant efforts to just give people the information that they need and for them to do their jobs. So we worked with DWD in 2019 And we started conversations very early in the year, and then really started to take action in Q2, Q3 of combining. Well, one company we just shut it down. So we had 3 remaining companies in Sage that we migrated to a singular new company, and that means all products, all inventory, all customers, and I think what's really unique about what we did, all histories.
Right.
So our internal team members, if we don't migrate history, they need to look something up. Well, they have to change companies, look it up, then come back to the main company, make their changes. So we put a lot of thought into it, so it's easier for our team members. If it's easier for them, it's going to ultimately reflect as being easier for our customers.
Right, and to that, that was a big change. That was a big change for the whole organization, and you had made a lot of steps along the way, getting to 2018 to 2019 with smaller projects, right, to clean up the data, right, and try to work with the groups to understand that we're capturing information that's important to us. But when it came to this is a huge change for an organization, right? So can you speak to maybe what you did, either communication, organization, but getting people on board for such a change, right? Because that's a lot of times when I worked, and I mean, I've done consulting for almost 10 years, the hardest thing is change for people. When you go into an organization, be it an ERP or a CRM, and they're so used to doing things one way, and then you're coming in and saying, hey, well, now here's the new way of doing it. Be it better or not, it doesn't seem to matter sometimes. It's change. So, I mean, can you speak to, I mean, how you minimize that and how you communicated change to people as you did these kinds of projects?
So for project 1, it was actually very easy because it was a pain point. We were solving a pain that the organization had. You know, buyers were having to log into different companies, and at times they would be looking for something, they couldn't find it, only to realize they were in the wrong company. You know, accounting was like, oh my gosh, do that and we will be your friend forever. But some of the other projects were more difficult. And so it really starts with the why. Why are we doing this? And then getting into more of the what. So it was trying to show people that we're trying to streamline it. How is it impacting the customer? How is it impacting their job? So, and getting people involved in the solution, not
Right.
just saying, here's what we're doing, get on board with it, and we're going to deliver to you the final solution. It's getting thought leaders and people who are most affected by it, getting them involved in the process so that their DNA is on it, and they can say, hey, we made these changes, I participated in this, I helped this. And when there are detractors in a department, you know, the thought leader can say, well, we did it for these reasons. You know, we can look back at it now and say, is it optimal or not? But there was thought into it, thought going into it, so at least you have allies.
Right.
And you can't just speak from the top in the ivory tower and say, okay, go do this, make this happen. There's empathy that needs to go along with it. And when you provide people the opportunity, sometimes they make choices that later on they regret. You don't beat them up about it. You say, well, we learned from it and we can change again. We changed once, we'll change it again. And letting people know that we're about to launch a new web platform. And my message to everyone is, the launch is not the finish line, it's the starting point.
Right. I mean, a lot of times it's the, you go into a project, that's the number one thing for us to communicate is this is just the start, right? So a lot of times ours is a phased approach because, hey, I mean, we really want to just get you up and running and get you to where you were to function, right? And then let's look at phase 2 and 3 like you have done and say, okay, now how can we improve, right? But one thing that I think you're minimizing, and I know you're good at this, is a roadmap almost, like having a clear roadmap and having a plan in place. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, you know, we do have a roadmap, and quarterly we review it. But roadmaps at times do have detours.
Right.
Things come up. You have to be responsive. So we don't chart a course and say we're only following this course. We look at where we're at, and then does the current course of action, what we're planning on doing, does it make sense, or do we need to adjust?
Right.
One of the other things that I think is really important with regards to change is our business analyst didn't enter into our business as a business analyst. She was in a sales role for 5 or 6 years, and she actually left the company. She was a very valued team member, but she wanted to be a business analyst. And at that time, we didn't quite have the role for her. So she left for not quite a year, and she found that she missed the company, she missed the people, and the job that she was promised wasn't really being a business. It was data entry. And so I was fortunate to talk to her and bring her back. She understands we are a sales-driven company. Okay, that is what we are founded on. Our CEO he would describe himself as a salesman. And her knowledge of our customers, our sales process, and how it interfaces with systems is absolutely critical to our success. And she has credibility. You know, I think I've developed my credibility over time, but day one, when she stepped in that role, she had credibility because she was a known entity and was very successful in her previous role. So having people like that are really important.
And so as you take her back in, you start down this roadmap of, like you said, Project One, this big change for the organization. How did you change management? I think is an important thing. I mean, how did you manage that?
So this is a philosophy of mine that I learned from a prior CEO, and it is, you haven't communicated something enough until you're sick of talking about it. So we would provide monthly updates as to where we're at, and we actually got users at times into the system to see how it would work, and they found things that were maybe small but important. So we had to reformat forms and little things like that, but giving them an opportunity to play in a safe environment so they can actually help us do testing. You know, and it's not this day one, we're going live, you've never been in this environment before, but trust me, everything's going to be great. They, I think, entered into it going, okay, we know what to do. And I think that's where initially when we launched Sage at the end of 2014, we fell down. We did not do sufficient user testing. I was fortunate to be part of a team that implemented SAP, and at that time it was a $35 million company. And most people go, you're nuts. It was 18 months, but when we went live, it was a non-event. You know, people don't stand up on their desk and clap for you and cheer for you. You implemented SAP. No, they just want to be able to do their jobs and do it well.
Right.
So the non-event is really what I look for. Is people go, yeah, it's a regular day at work. Well, what are you looking for? That's success in my book.
And that's what I think we all dream of, right? I mean, if I think of ERP implementations and things that I've been just part of, you almost want go lives to be non-events. Some organizations are challenged with that because of things like you mentioned, training and testing and things like that, maybe not being done as much as can be, right? How did you get your team to get involved with that? I mean, how did you, they have a day job, right? I mean, I have a day job to do all these things. How did you convince them or make sure they had time to be able to do this testing and things?
We would meet with them in functional area groups.
Okay.
And talk about, you know, okay, here's what we need to do. We don't expect you to do the work to the configuration, things like that. But when we get it to a point where we think you can test it, could you run some transactions for us? And again, we didn't really change a lot of business process. In fact, we added through subtraction. We took away work, so it was easier for people. I will say, I don't know if any of the attendees were affected by the tariffs, but we, in August of, what was that, 2018? You know, we were looking at it going, oh boy, you know, this is coming. What do we do about it? And we didn't go to a technical solution right away. We met with the sales organization, and it was all of sales, and we talked about, okay, here's what's coming at us. Our cost is going up 25%. Customers are not going to like paying more. What can we give you? How do we approach it with your customers so that they don't feel like they're getting beat up, that you're not losing business? That was the biggest concern sales has, is I'm gonna lose my customers.
Right.
And so we agreed upon building a line item that could be turned on or off and flagging products. So we implemented exactly, fairly close to exact what sales asked for.
Right.
And some people were more effective, some people were less effective, but overall at the end there was buy-in. It wasn't, hey, IT implemented this solution and it doesn't work for us and we're angry.
Right, and I think that keeps coming back to, and I think that's the important thing that some organizations struggle with, but it's getting buy-in. I mean, I'm a fan of that when I meet with people, and I mean, I'm not afraid to ask, like, have you talked to the team? Have you gone to the floor and talked to those people and asked them about it? Because to me, that's the most important thing. I can put a great system in place, but if no one actually cares that it's there or wants to use it, and it's just somebody saying you have to use it, that doesn't work, right? And so I mean, I love what you guys have done, and I think that's the point of today, is to communicate this to everyone and share this, because it's worked great for American Cutting Edge. I've, in 20, I think you said 2014, you guys implemented Sage 100. We weren't that team. You and I started talking, I think, around 2016, maybe, somewhere in there.
Late 2015.
Was it? Okay, yeah, somewhere in there. And so, I mean, just over the last 4 years, to watch the organization grow and the changes that you guys have made and just being part of it, again, why we here today, I think it's important to share, right? To share with everyone. So
yeah, a couple of other points, Chris, I'd briefly add is, one, data integrity is everything. We are not pristine, okay? We never will be.
Right.
But the focus on data integrity and putting checks in place to ensure that, hey, we set up 27 new customers this month. Are they set up properly? The ripple effect. We built new items. Are they set up properly? And educating people around what these fields do and what they drive, so that data is going in the right place. And we had some scenarios where we were creating a lot of user-defined fields. And this goes back into the 2015 timeframe. And we were creating all these user-defined fields because we didn't take the time to really understand what was native to Sage. And the fields were already there.
Right.
We just didn't really understand it well enough. And we go back now, and the first question is, okay, if additional data is required, are there fields already in Sage designed to accommodate it? Let's use what Sage offers out of the box, and then if it doesn't, we can find different solutions.
Right, and a lot of that's training, right? I mean, that was, I think the key is that you just needed more training. Maybe it's training you can't do day one, but a year later, now everybody's kind of got the idea. Let's really now sit down and go through and say, okay, what questions do you have? What processes aren't working well for you? What can we automate? What do these fields that you're using or ideas that you have, what fields would help you build that, right? And I think that was a big step in your guys' growth, is that you guys sat down and did that, right? But I think one of the things that came from that data integrity is people also learned to trust the ERP more, right? I mean, that really did allow you a big time saver when you went through that process to say, I go in there and look at an item, I kind of believe it's actually there, right? And you start to be able to do automated reporting and even automate processes because things are a little bit cleaner, right?
Right.
So you want to speak to that point.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you brought up the example of people not believing the system, and we had an issue with inventory where a customer would call up and say, yeah, I need 10 of these knives. Salesperson would look up the system. Well, the system says 12, but let me go out and count. And that was a daily occurrence. And we didn't solve it overnight. I mean, we did a full physical. There were other things that we did, but also it was, hey, when we issue things out, when we receive things in, do we have a three-way match? When we started doing that, the volume of people having to check out in the warehouse, fell to the point where it really became a non-issue. And I think that's a very positive thing. Again, it didn't happen overnight, but through consistent process, and that's one of the things as an organization, we were good at documenting process, but the way we were doing it, people couldn't follow it. It was all Word documents. So we'd have these lengthy Word documents, no pictures, just words on a page.
Oh, yeah.
So then we migrated to, okay, let's make this visual and started adding pictures. Now we've gone to video. So when we have a new salesperson, and here's how you create a customer, here's how you create an order, here's how you print the order out to the warehouse, all these different processes, we actually use video for it. And I have two people that are really strong at not only understanding the process, but recording it and stepping through it and narrating it. And that's something I've learned too with the pandemic. We are outside of our warehouse and manufacturing teams, everyone else has worked from home. And I would send out month-end emails, this is how we did. And I don't know if people ever read them, but I do know now, I do videos now. So I do a video about once every 2 weeks, 5 to 7 minutes, just to give an update on the company. And I never got a response to any of the emails I sent. I get responses to the videos I've sent. So video, you think about today's generation, YouTube, you want to learn something, you go to YouTube and you search it and then you press play.
Right.
Reading a book on it, probably not going to happen.
Right. I like that. And it's a better engagement. I mean, it's no different than even in the sales process in our world or other worlds that, I mean, you want to have the human connection, and a human connection via an email is weak, right? A human connection just through a phone conversation, while better, is still weak, but to actually be able to look at you and interact with you, and like you said, during this pandemic, that's a great decision, right? If I look at clients that I work with, I think the number one thing I repeat constantly is, do you have standard operating procedures and are they understandable, right? And so, I mean, to hear that you've gone to video, I knew you had the other documents. I'd helped a couple of your individuals and walk through things, and we had done those, but to hear that you're going to video now, I think that's a great decision. And I'm sure your employees actually, like you said, the generation is actually, like, it's a lot easier for me to just watch this few-minute video than to sit here and read, right?
Sure. Yeah,
do it on my mobile device and all these things.
Yeah, I'm 50 years old. And if you said, hey, here's a document you can read or here's a video you can watch, I'm going to watch the video.
Right. So the salespeople, I mean, they built the trust, right, and the data. You guys really worked hard on cleaning up the data. I know you have exception reports that go out that, hey, we didn't fill this in, that kind of stuff, right? Would you say that's because you wanted to improve the communication with your internal teams on what's happening with the business and what's happening in their world, and if they can do better, so that when they wake up every morning or every Monday they come in, they've got information at their hands that make them better at their job and maybe help the customer even more so?
Right. So one of the things that we had some sales reporting, but it was very vague. It was very broad. And so what we did is we aligned customers with salespeople in Sage. They were aligned with our customers, and salespeople were aligned. It just wasn't documented anywhere. People knew from experience, oh, this customer's mine.
Right.
We broke that apart and we started assigning salespeople to customers appropriately. And then from there, I basically took a format that I've used before. Our salespeople are salary plus commission.
Okay.
So we then created a daily sales report that is broken out by salesperson. It shows their daily goal, what they booked, what they shipped, both their revenue and what we call MP or merchandise profits. And that's just revenue less COGS. It's not true gross profit. So that they understand they have goals. Here's how they're tracking towards their goal. We don't hide any data from them. There's detail behind it. We've added a couple of pivot tables to help them find things they might be looking for to disorder invoice yesterday, for example. But it's transparency. So when we first developed it, we agreed that we're going to run in tandem. We're going to have the old sales reporting and the automated new sales reporting. And about after a week, I don't even know if it was a week, I got a couple salespeople ask me, well, why do you keep sending us the old report? It doesn't tell us anything. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll treat that as a win. And then one day we had some system issue and the report was late. It typically comes out at 8:25 every day. And it didn't come out at 8:25. And probably by 9 o'clock, I had at least a half a dozen salespeople saying, are we getting the DSR, daily sales report DSR today? And at that point, I realized, okay, we're on to something. It gives them visibility. And we don't just share it with sales. Every person in the company is copied on it. And it's not to browbeat anyone. It's just, how are we tracking at a macro level this month?
Right.
And looking through the windshield as much as we can. How are our bookings? Because that sets up our future. And trying to get everyone involved in our business, not just on a transactional level, but helping us run the business.
Did you do anything that, I mean, this helps the team know, how are we doing, right? How are we doing in our job? How are we doing in our commissions? And what are our sales and bookings look like? But what about something to help the customer? I mean, is there anything that you're doing to make their life easier with all this, accurate data and automating of things? I mean, is there anything that you could talk about on that side?
Yeah, so this was not my idea. It was an idea that we had attempted to execute years ago, and it was called the Critical Component Management Report. And it would be for some of our high-profile customers that do a significant amount of volume. And what we would do is we would send them this report, and we're kind of helping them manage their inventory. The inventory might be in our warehouse, but we want them to know, hey, this is how many you've consumed, this is how many you have on order, this is how many we have on the shelf, this is what we have on PO, so that we can help them manage their inventory. But it died off because it was extremely laborious to put together. It would take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours for a singular customer, to put the report together for a singular customer. So we looked at it and we thought, okay, well, it's just data. So we then basically reformulated it, and we're now able to do it in an automated fashion. And we don't send it directly to the customer. We like to send it to the salesperson so that they can engage in a conversation with the customer about it. And I think that's really meaningful, and it moves the dial for us.
So the customers, I would assume you're getting positive. I mean, it's a net promoter. It's a positive experience for them because you're calling them and saying, hey, there's just some things I'm noticing. It's not, it's a sales call, but it's not a sales call, right? I mean, you are trying to help them see that, hey, you're trending this way, and here's how stock's looking, et cetera. I just want to make you aware, and you're making it easy for your organization to get that out.
Right. Yeah. When the salesperson goes and calls the customer to talk about inventory planning, it's not a sales call.
Right.
We are a business partner. We're helping them manage their inventory, and that adds value to them.
Right. So I mean, now we've got something for the customer related to inventory and different things like that. I know one of the big things that you've been through recently is just your own inventory, right? And reducing the cash conversion cycle. I mean, that was a big thing to work through, right? And because you just didn't know the stock that was obsolete and different things like that. What do we have on hand that's too much, et cetera? Can you talk a little bit about how you've, reduced that in half is what you've told me.
Right. So, yeah, and this was done by a former CFO. He actually started after I started. He has since left the company. But the cash conversion cycle really looks at your inventory and how much you have on hand. It looks at your outstanding AR, so your DSO or daily sales open, and then your payables that are open, your AP. And we were looking at it, and we had customers who were paying us really late, and we didn't know it. Unless you looked at the customer record, there wasn't anything to tell you that this was happening. So we created what we call our accounts receivable dashboard, and our director of finance just updates it each Monday and sends it out to sales so that the salespeople can see, okay, here are my customers that are on credit hold, and this is why they're on credit hold. Did they exceed their limit? Are they not paying their bills? And it also helps sales. Invariably what would happen is a customer go on credit hold, and then a couple days later, they desperately and urgently need a product. And it created this friction between accounting and sales, because accounting would say, well, your customer's on credit hold, so no, we're not going to ship it. So by involving sales in the AR, and I don't want them to be overly involved, but they can help grease the skids. Hey, Chris, I noticed that this invoice is falling behind. Is there something that you need from me so we can get it caught up? I don't want you going on credit hold or anything like that. You're a great customer. So by proactively providing this information, sales isn't blindsided. The customer gets a friendly touch from their salesperson, sometimes Jen and our accounts receivable. We also use paperless office to send out invoices as well as AR statements. And getting customers set up on paperless office has been, I think, a huge help for Jen, because we have it configured so that only certain customers get statements. I mean, they have to have a balance. It has to be over a certain amount, I don't know, $25 or something. But letting the system do this work to communicate with our customers so that they're not blindsided.
Right.
No one likes being blindsided by that. With our inventory, we knew the dollars we had on the shelf. At least we thought we did. But really understanding what is excess and obsolete, how do we create a provision for it, how do we manage it? We just went through this. We do it on a biannual basis where we'll go through, run the report, and it's not to address every item that's excess or obsolete. It's really to look at the items that have volume behind them, COGS volume. And hey, we brought this in for this customer, it's not moving. Mr. and Mrs. Salesperson, what's going on here? How do we get it cleaned up? Like any company, we don't like writing off inventory. It happens, but how do we manage it by being proactive with information so that we're not at the end of the year thinking, hey, we had a great year. Oh, and now we're looking at a six-figure write-off. We didn't have such a great year. So staying ahead of it. And also, too, we use crystal reports, and some of this isn't automated. I don't want to set the expectation that everything we do is automated. Some of it is quasi-automated, but not only saying, here's the item, but here are the customers who've bought it in the past. If you can give that to salespeople, okay, they'll take action typically. I don't have to look it up. It's not saying, well, this item is excess. Someone find a home for it. No, I need these salespeople have these customers who buy it, see if they can get some of it moving.
Did we lose you?
I'm here.
Okay. Internet paused on my end, I think, a little bit there. So, I mean, you have all this. I mean, to a point. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. One other thing that we did with our inventory is we started subscribing to Sage Inventory Advisor.
Right.
And historically, what we did is we had a min-max report, and buyers would look at it. They would interpret things differently, and they would come up with a recommended buy. And they would talk to senior salespeople. Does this quantity look right? There's a lot of guesswork.
Right.
So we implemented 3 years ago Sage Inventory Advisor, and at first we struggled with it because we really didn't understand what it was doing. But we stayed with it, and we made some very minor system changes, added a couple fields. but really got our people well trained, our buyers well trained on Sage Inventory Advisor. And it runs various inventory models and says, okay, it uses statistics. And so it says, statistically, this is what's most likely to happen. And it's really helped us manage our inventory. To give you an example, coming into the pandemic, our inventory was running at about $7 million.
Okay.
And since the pandemic, we're running between 6.5 and 7. And you say, well, if your revenues were way down, shouldn't your inventory be way down? We're making a deliberate decision to, in some items, keep the inventory up because there's some scarcity in the market. But we've been really able to control our inventory so that we're not tying up cash on the shelf that we need for operations. So the fact that, our cash conversion cycle is running at plan this year, our cash conversion cycle was 130 days. We're at 133 days. So to me, we are on track. Is it the exact number? No, but considering all the conditions that we're dealing with,
Right.
I'm very proud of our supply chain team and our accounting team for keeping our cash conversion so strong.
Back on the Sage Inventory Advisor real quick. So I've had clients purchase that and put it in and it goes nowhere. I've had clients that purchased it, put it in, and done really well with it. What kind of experience or what did you do to make it succeed?
I found a champion. I found someone who really thought it was an interesting technology. And he would then go and work with SIA directly and go through the trainings. They do, I will say this, there is a training every week on SIA.
Right.
There is an abundance of training opportunities with Sage Inventory Advisor. So he became the resident expert. And then his job was to train others. So, this is how he's doing it. And then people would have, questions or concerns. And they would bring it, his name was Aaron. And they'd bring it to him and he'd work through it. And sometimes he could figure it out on his own. Other times he had to go back to SIA, but we could get a answer. And one of the buyers one day, I asked him, I said, so, how often do you use, we used to have what's called the min-max report, which is what we use to manage inventory. How often do you use that? Now he goes, I still get the report. I haven't looked at it in months. And I'm like, okay, we're winning. That's a win right there.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, and that's always the thing with the Sage Inventory Advisor when we put it in or had clients buy it. I mean, there's some places the purchaser is afraid to implement it because I think they're afraid to lose their job potentially, like it's going to replace them somehow, which it's not what it's meant for, right? It's just to make better decisions. So I was curious there.
Yeah.
So as your business continues to, like I said earlier, maybe grow's not the right word right now for everyone, right? But we expect growth. There's going to be an upturn. This only lasts so long, right? So we need to ensure profitability. We need to ensure that we're going to grow coming out of this, right? And foster that culture of continuous improvement, right? So at the end here, we're down to about 12 minutes. And you and I just keep talking, and we could probably keep talking for the next 2 to 3 hours. But I just want to kind of come back around to that foster that culture of continuous improvement, right? I mean, you mentioned starting with acknowledging of what you've accomplished, right? Including people in the decision-making process, right? Because including someone, even if it's a person that just stocks the shelves, right? Going out there and just talking to them and saying, hey, here's something we're thinking about, and getting that information and feedback, not necessarily what you're going to do, right? But like you said, it includes them in the process, right? I know that you guys are having a big shift coming, and I'll bring it up, this new facility, right? And so I think one of those in that foster the culture of continuous improvement. Can you speak to what you're doing in this new facility as it's getting put together?
Okay, yeah, so we are currently we have two campuses. We have one in Centerville, Ohio, and one in Miamisburg, Ohio. They're about 8 miles apart. And there's a long story as to how we got here, but it's call it a legacy artifact. And with work from home, it really didn't make sense before the pandemic. Post-pandemic or within the pandemic, it makes absolutely no sense. So we are consolidating facilities in Miamisburg, and we are rehabilitating some older buildings that we have to consolidate our warehouse and all of our sales and administrative offices, even though we are going to maintain a element of work from home for the foreseeable future. So what we're doing is not going out and, Brad Miller is our director of operations. He isn't building a game plan and then he's going to execute it and then people are going to work in what he executed. He's having people from Miamisburg go over to Centerville to look at, understand the product, how it flows, the needs of the product. And likewise, having people from Centerville go over to Miamisburg to understand, hey, here's kind of the vision, but we don't have all the answers. What are the things that you'd like to see? What are the things that get in your way? What could make us more productive, efficient? What could make your job easier? And how can we, and by doing that, how can we look positive in front of the customer? And sometimes it's the little things. Getting an order right is like, okay, no one should get applause for getting an order right. But when we get it wrong, it's messy, it's ugly, it costs the customer time, it costs us time, it costs both parties money, it's dissatisfying. Right. So how can we build a facility backed by process and systems that ensures that every order goes out and it's correct? I think that's really important. So getting people involved in the solution creation process so that they have not only buy-in, but they can say, I helped build that. Pride and ownership, I think is really a key. And also, and I will be the first to admit, I'm not great at this. Celebrating small wins and acknowledging accomplishments. I'm kind of a guy who, okay, we said we're going to do it, we did it. Okay, great, let's move on. But pausing and to acknowledge the people and what they've contributed and that we are capable of positive change. Also acknowledging too, we've made changes, they weren't the right changes, so we need to go reassess and change again, figure it out, and involve more people in the process.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's a great way to set up an environment in which you work. I mean, we try to do that exact same thing here at DWD because all the consultants want to take ownership, right? We try to preach that same thing that, your client is your client, and yeah, we're here to help you as a team and help the client as a team. But typically, as you have a consultant that's typically assigned to you, right? That really gets to know your business, and it's that taking the ownership and learning about them and understanding why they do things, etc. So I can't say I agree with you wholeheartedly. So all of this, I think the number one thing, we're business owners, directors, whatever it is, everything we talked about today was making processes better, change management, and using our teams to make ourselves better. How do you see this? How does this affect growth? How does this affect profitability?
So in a couple of ways. I mean, number one is having scalable processes.
Right.
So as the company grows, the processes remain the same and we just scale. We don't have to reinvent it. We don't have to, we could do it with one person, but now we have 10 people and the same process doesn't work. So really trying to figure out how do we make processes scalable. And doing that work up front. Hey, this is what it's going to look like out of the gates, but down the road when we have 5 or 6 people, is the same process sustainable and looking for sustainability. So I think that's really key. How does it make us more efficient? Using technology to make us more efficient, so as we're growing our revenues, we don't necessarily have to grow our headcount. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't grow our payroll, because as people develop new skills, they become more valuable. And how can we put them in roles that create more value for the organization and they benefit from that and in their paychecks. And I think that's an important part of it is, hey, the company is growing. Are our employees growing not only with their skill set, but financially? Are they receiving the reward?
Right.
Cost avoidance or reduction of waste is another one. I think I mentioned to you, Chris, we had a report that would take, I don't know, 10 to 15 hours to assemble. And we had some personnel changes. We're trying to figure out who's going to do what and how the information flows. And I was just trying to understand how is it that we're investing 10 to 15 hours? And this person has to do this, and then it gets handed off, then it goes over here, and someone stirs it for a day or two, and then it goes somewhere else. So then I started asking, well, who uses this report? And the people involved in the report honestly didn't know. And so I started asking around, well, do you use this production report? Oh, no, I haven't used that in years. Come to find out, no one uses it. We just, out of sheer momentum, we were spending 10 to 15 hours a week on a report that no one used. So right there, I picked up, a quarter to a half employee.
Right. And that's really just the curiosity factor, right? I think you and I have talked about that. New people are curious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is something to be said about trying to come in and look at something with new eyes, right? They're going to ask a little bit more about why. But also at the same time, leadership and listening to the people down below that are maybe where the churn is a little bit more, because they may be more, some of those will show curiosity and say, why do we do this, right? And I think you guys have done a great job with that. And that's a valuable thing for all companies. So we're down to about 4 minutes here. One of the things that we, talked about is all these changes you've made over the last 4, 5, 6 years, right? I think I want to just mention that I think these changes have really prepared your company to weather storms. I think that, profitability right now isn't probably the right word. We're all seeing probably a little bit of a dip in profitability, right? But I would say what you have done is helped prepare this company and the people that work there being able to keep their job. You've prepared it to weather something like this.
Yeah, we got into action early. I had a former chairman who I wouldn't say he was clairvoyant, but he anticipated the 2008 meltdown, and he got us in action early. And I learned a lot from him and about that scenario. So in the February timeframe, we started doing some financial modeling, some planning. We then talked to the management team, said this is what we're seeing. And we had to make some tough decisions. And so basically we froze all hiring, no new hires. Each department was tasked with a certain amount of either cost avoidance or savings. Mm-hmm. And we really hunkered down to weather the storm, and we've not been unaffected. Our revenues year to date are down 15% over plan, which makes it 7 or 8% down over prior year. However, year to date, our bottom line profitability is at plan. We've gotten to that without any reduction in headcount, without cutting pay. We did go and we do profit sharing. We deferred profit sharing in Q1, even though it was earned. But by the end of Q2, we recognized, we're in a stable financial position. We owe it to these people to pay them for their performance in Q1. We did defer merit increases up. We implemented them last month, so they were due April 1st, and we held off until August, but we also made them retroactive, so people were made whole. We made some tough choices and some decisions that were optimal and some that weren't. And we learned from it, we listened, we worked together as a team and put ourselves in a good position to come out of the pandemic in a very strong position.
Right. So curious, if you hadn't done what you referred to as Project One, and I know what that took, and that was a big investment, right? Do you think this would have been able to have the same result this year?
No, because again, we were so diluted, and
Right.
it's just everything was so manual and laborious. It would have
Right.
been very difficult, and we might have had to, reduce in some areas or staff up in others. But one of the things that we've done is as we've become more efficient and we've had some voluntary turnover, we've found that through automation, we don't have to backfill. I would say for every voluntary, this is outside of sales, so operations administration, we probably backfill 1 out of every 2 voluntary turnovers.
Okay.
And we don't, we're a pretty stable organization, but I can tell you that we have 4 less people in administrative functions this year than we did last year.
Right. So we've made our processes better, right? I mean, and it's allowed us to have a cost savings, right?
Yeah, and sometimes
Or repurpose.
it's challenging what we're doing and saying, do we really still need to do that, or is that just an artifact that we is being done out of momentum?
Right. Right. Okay, we are past our time. Like I said, Gregory, I think you and I could talk forever, but thank you for joining me today, right? I truly appreciate it. I really hope, everyone will get something out of this. I know I do every time I talk to you, and when I talk to most of my clients, right? I'm always learning something, so I truly appreciate that. So again, thank you everyone for attending today. I don't see any questions out there. I'll double check with Sherry here. Do we have anything that I have missed?
No, I don't see any questions right now. If you do have a question, please use the chat box.
Right.
And we'll wait just a couple more. Oh, here we go. We've got a question. Are you using Sage CRM in the sales process? If so, how did it impact sales prior to COVID?
So we are using Sage CRM, but we are not using opportunity management.
Right.
Opportunity management was implemented when we went live, and it was done very, very poorly, so it's not usable. But we have our VP of Sales has developed a dashboard that's more forward-looking, and it's using data from reports that we have automated in Sage.
Right. So I will say, just to help answer that question, they use Sage CRM heavily. A lot of it's recording interactions and providing data to the sales team as they're going about their day. To his point, right? When I got in there with their team about, I don't know, I want to say 4 to 5 months ago, I think it was, to look at opportunities. The area had been butchered up pretty good. And so we have started down the path of adjusting it slowly but surely to see if it would work. So, okay, any other questions? If not, I think on the screen is my information. Please feel free to reach out via email, a phone call, whatever it is. If there's any questions you have, questions for Gregory, I'd be happy to pass along and get some feedback for you. But again, thank you, Gregory, for joining me today.
My pleasure, Chris. And real quick, I was going to mention, if I can be of benefit to anyone who watches this video, please reach out to Chris. He has my contact information. I'm not a paid spokesperson for WD.
Nope.
We've worked very closely together. It's a true partnership, and I really am appreciative of Chris and the entire DWD team for not only what they've enabled us to do, but the teaching and coaching and mentoring that they've provided that has made us very self-sufficient. Our IT administrator has grown leaps and bounds, and it's the DWD team that's made that possible.
Right, and I think it's because we do what, you preach to some degree. To me, teach a man to fish, right? Teach the person how to do it, right? Don't just do it for them all the time. So yes, absolutely. Feel free. I will pass you to Gregory just anytime. So, okay, we're 4 minutes past. My apologies, everyone. Go have a great day. And again, thank you for attending, and thank you, Gregory.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.